O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come. Dear Lord, we are so thankful unto you for the wonderful way you have been with us and blessed us and helped us in the past 50 years. And now, because you have been so fantastic and wonderful to us in the past, we know we can trust you for the future. Dear Father, I pray in a very special way for every member in this house today, that as we have come to reason together to do the work of the people of this land, we will understand that reasoning together does not mean that we will not differ in opinions and ideas and views. But where we disagree, we must do so in respect for one another's views, ideas, and this will help us along. Father, today I want to pray in a very special way for the Honorable Leroy Rogers, the Speaker of this House. We thank you, dear Lord, for the progress he has made in his healing. And we are trusting you for his continued healing and restoration. We pray, O Father, for the Honorable Terry Harrigan, who is in the chair today to do the work of the Speaker. We ask that you would give him your guidance so that he, in turn, will guide us. Dear Father, I want to thank you for traveling mercies that you have given the Honorable Mr. Banks, leader of government business, that he is here with us today. And I want to especially thank you for the traveling mercies you have given to the Honorable opposition leader who went off to England and represented Anguilla so well. Be with us now, O Lord, as we do the business of the people of this land. We pray that we will do it in unity and in love, so that your sweet spirit will abide with us in this house this day, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good morning. Thank you, Elder Smith.
Confirmation of minutes? None. Oaths of allegiance? None. Announcements by the direction of the Speaker?
Good morning. I have a statement from the Honorable Leroy Rogers, the Speaker of the House. To the honorable members of the House of Assembly, I would like to thank God Almighty for the many blessings He has bestowed on this, our iron home, for the last 50 years since the Revolution. He has in many ways prospered our path so that today Anguilla is home to peoples of many nations and continents. I would also like to pay homage to the leaders of the Anguilla Revolution, who stood as the standard bearers for the cause, and the people of Anguilla, who provided them with unwavering support. Today I also continue to thank God for His blessings given me over the last 2 months of my illness. There is no doubt that His hands have buoyed me up and protected me as I continue to recuperate and grow from strength to strength. In this regard, I would like to thank my family, the medical and nursing teams at the Royal Melbourne Hospital in Australia and the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Anguilla, as well as the Massa Transport team for their excellent care. Additionally, I extend my sincere appreciation to the government of Anguilla, the Governor's Office, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association for all the interventions made on my behalf during this time. The level of support given me by the members of this honorable House and the wider public at large has been nothing short of phenomenal. I would like to thank all who have visited with me, sent best wishes, sent flowers, or provided support in any capacity. Your kind regards and well wishes have served as a balm during this period. I know that God will always guide the deliberations of the House of Assembly, the conduct of government, and the lives of the people of Anguilla. we all know that there is no greater leader. The support that members have given to the Deputy Speaker in my absence is greatly appreciated. It is my hope that this continues as a matter of course during my respite and recuperation. May God bless you, and may God bless Anguilla. I also like to add to that, the Honorable Speaker and I, we go way back. We played a lot of music together, attended high school together, and is a personal friend. And I wish him all the best. At this time, I want to recognize the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Pamela Van Webster, for her role in the supervision of the UK general elections. The members invited to give a brief overview as to her experience in the UK.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I just want to, before I move into the gap report, just join all the well-wishers in Anguilla to extend our best wishes to the Honorable Speaker for recovery, full recovery. We are heartened by the news that he is progressing well and healing well, and we are thankful for that, and we'll continue to keep him in our prayers and our thoughts. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that in relation to your own placement as Speaker of the House, acting in that role, that it's particularly heartwarming to me, because your uncle, Atlin Noraldo Harrigan, OBE, of blessed memory, whose legacy informs this parliamentary building, I think that he is recognized in Anguilla by everyone without dispute as being impartial and independent at a time when it was absolutely critical. And his legacy, the opportunity you have, Mr. Speaker, to honor that legacy and to confirm its relevance and its importance in Anguilla at this time cannot be underestimated. I believe that everything that happens in this house for a reason. I believe God is moving in Anguilla in miraculous ways to deliver Fearless, to bring us back to those times which came prior to the revolution, where there was harmony, wonderful, beautiful harmony, where there was justice, where there was collaboration, where there was respect for everyone. And I noted that the chaplain prayed that we could bring once again into this house, that respect for each other, where we don't just focus on the political differences, but we value each other. Mr. Speaker, political differences are deep, and in Anguilla we've had too much partiality. Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that the opportunity that you have to confirm that legacy of impartiality is amazing, and I look forward to working with you to introduce into this house, even at this date, because it's what I believe God wants for us to do that and demonstrate those behaviors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Isle Harbour, can you just explain something about UK experience, and then we can move on to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you would have noted on page 3 of the 23rd June edition of the Anguillian, because I believe in absolutely reporting to the people, that I attended as a member of the international mission assessing the UK election. I think that election is one of the most historic elections that the world's witnessed, and certainly I believe that in the UK, the people recognize that our system of democracy, and in Anguilla we've inherited, a staunch, strong system of democracy, that in England, the opportunity of the voter to exercise freely is very much prevalent. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to read from the report. I'm going to deliver because I believe we are required to do it more regularly in Anguilla. I'm going to absolutely show the output through the preliminary report of that engagement and my participation. I was very privileged and honored to be part of the head team, the core team, the leading team on that election assessment mission. And I want to, through this medium, express great thanks to CPA UK, who I believe went above its responsibility to make sure that there was independence and impartiality, and that the persons, all members engaged in the mission, that they were facilitated in a way through their accommodation, through the meals, through the transportation arrangements, that they were facilitated to focus in a really responsible way on the election. And I want to thank them for their continued extension to Anguilla of the privileges that they extend to other Commonwealth countries. And Mr. Speaker, there's one other thing I feel compelled to do before I read the report, and that is to tell the good people of Anguilla who need to know how much monies we expended on that, on my travel into the UK. They will want to know that. It amounts to $1,850 US, or the EC equivalent of 5,241.99 cents. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that going forward, we can expect that every person who travels on the Anguilla budget will do the right thing and tell the people how much it's costing, because it's only in that context will we be able to assess the true value to our country and the true value of our attendance there. And while each of us might benefit from the privilege of being there, in actuality, it is our taxpayers' money, and I believe we owe that to them. So just to reconfirm, Anguilla paid for my flight, and they paid me 25 EC dollars a day subsistence. They paid for the boat, and that is how we arrived at the amount of $5,241.99. And what I will do as well, Mr. Speaker, relative to that, is I will give the good people of Anguilla, who funded that and afforded me that honor and that privilege to participate at the highest level. I promise you that I will absolutely ensure that the experience that I received as being part of that mission will find itself and the lessons manifested in what we're going to do in the future to bolster our system. I've already shared in the newspaper article that the first-time voter, it gave me such happiness and joy personally to know that the first-time voter in the UK is very, very embracing of the opportunity we have as young people, and I include myself and my energy in that group and in that demographic, to make a difference and to stand up for something that is not viewed as acceptable on any score. And I was proud of the election officers in the UK that, irrespective of which party they supported, they afforded each single voter that opportunity to vote in a responsible and private way. And Mr. Speaker, the postal vote in the UK were important. But you know why, Mr. Speaker, that system might be relevant in Anguilla? It might be relevant because instead of bringing in plane loads of people like we see in other Caribbean countries, and we see in Anguilla when the boats come in on election day, what that does, Mr. Speaker, it gives everybody in the diaspora, everywhere else, those who are unable to vote because of physical impediments or otherwise, in comfort, it gives them the opportunity to participate in our democracy. I think the opportunities that I've learned should manifest in Anguilla when we change the electoral regime coming up. And so now, Mr. Speaker, I will deliver the formal report.
Member, can you tell us how long is the report going to take?
Oh, it's not going to take very long, okay, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell you as well.
No, I'm just in the interest of time for the other business to go on. I just want to have an idea.
You know what, Mr. Speaker? I'm going to
just give us an overview.
Very well. As our people listening will know, the general election was held on the UK on Thursday, 8th June 2017. The election took place in 650 constituencies of the United Kingdom. The CPA UK conducted the election assessment mission across 8 constituencies of those 650 during the period Saturday 3rd June to Saturday 10th June 2017. And each of the constituencies, the subject of the election assessment, we were asked to, in those constituencies, consider the conduct of the electoral process and make recommendations for improvement. And so there was a recognition as in that assessment, as there is in Anguilla, and you'll remember that we had an observation mission that the CPA UK funded as well in Anguilla during the last election. But there's a recognition that a genuine democratic election is a critical element of the democratic process, and it provides voters with an informed choice between political alternatives. It must take place in an environment of political pluralism, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, adherence to the rule of law, a level playing field for political contestants, public confidence in the process, which in Anguilla is missing, sadly, transparency and accountability. And a genuine democratic election also provides individuals and groups with the opportunity to express their political voice in competition, fair competition with their opponents without resort to violence, and enables the peaceful transfer of political power. So you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, we're going to look for campaign financing as well, legislation. That is a critical element to the exercise of that right. And then credible observation involves a comprehensive, independent, and impartial assessment of an electoral process to evaluate the extent to which it complies with international obligations, commitments, and standards for democratic elections. And through this, election observation promotes transparency and accountability. It deters fraud. where people are educated in the process, and it enhances public confidence and participation in the electoral process. So this in turn strengthens democratic institutions and reduces the potential for election-related violence, continuing to contribute to ensuring peace and stability. So you see, Mr. Speaker, why it's important in everything we do to be fair and to assure those values are met. And in Anguilla, we have a long way to go, but I hope that by virtue of the experience that I've secured, that I will become a voice to assure that our people know what their rights are, that our people understand that every small action is relevant in terms of the delivery, and, Mr. Speaker, that our political parties and opponents, when they engage in activities that fall short and put our country in jeopardy in terms of its reputation, that they will in fact be visited by effective legal consequences in line with the rule of law. So I think, Mr. Speaker, we're in for a wonderful time coming in Anguilla. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from this corner.
With God's help.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I'd just like to respond to the statement made by the Honourable Speaker of the House.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, what is this? What is this? What is this in the rules? You just let the member for Valley South tell us which rule. Which rule he is relying on to stand up in relation to this item. Thank you.
Member from Valley South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I visited Mr. Rogers yesterday, and I would just like to report to the Honourable House that he is in excellent recovery mode, and he was very grateful for the support that the wider community and members of this Honourable House would have given to him in so many different ways. And I'm very hopeful that he is on a very swift path to recovery. I had the opportunity to spend some time with him, and he's in good spirits, and he is doing fine. So just because I had that opportunity to do it yesterday, even before he sent this letter to this Honourable House, I would like to convey those sentiments to members of the House to feel sure, and the wider Anguillan community, that Mr. Rogers is doing well, and that we look forward to a speedy recovery. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from District South.
Mr. Speaker, there's a fuller report on the preliminary, there's a full report, and I'm going to make that available in the House. I'd like to share that with you, that full report with all the members, and I would like as well in the future that we have an opportunity to go back to those lessons. So I want to make it available and in our library. Thank you very much.
You can do that.
Thank you.
Papers?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the Financial Services Commission's statement. Before I do so, may I extend my own well wishes to the Honourable Mr. Speaker Rogers and wish him well with his recovery, and may God continue to bless him. Honourable Mr. Speaker, I beg leave of this Honourable House to lay on the table the Anguilla Financial Services Commission financial statements for the period ending 31 December 2015. Mr. Speaker, the Financial Services Commission Act at Section 17(3) requires that Her Excellency the Governor shall, as soon as reasonably practical, cause the audit accounts of the Anguilla Financial Services Commission to be tabled in this Honourable House. The accounts of the Anguilla FSC financial statements for the period ending 31 December 2015 have been certified by the Chief Auditor, and the report on the financial position of the Commission presents fairly in all material respects the financial position and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with international financial reporting standards and the terms of the Financial Services Commission Act. Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I would like to move that the accounts, having been duly laid, be printed for the information of members of this Honourable House and the general public in Anguilla.
Thank you, Attorney General. Thank you.
Reports from committees? None. Petitions? None. Government notices? None. Unofficial notices? None. Questions? None. Motion 489.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, motion 489, be it hereby resolved that the Committee of the Whole House on the Indigenous Banking Sector, which has convened once only on Friday, 13th November 2015, and which has not hitherto accomplished any useful purpose, be convened as a matter of urgency, and that it promptly consider and make recommendations on, firstly, the threat to the people of Anguilla, represented by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank Asset Management Company's powers and plans to dispose of Anguilla land, and how such threat can be ameliorated or preferably, Mr. Speaker, avoided altogether, with a view to ensuring that Anguilla land continues to be predominantly in the ownership of Anguillians. How the government can best assist those people in Anguilla affected by such threat and address the hardship and despair engendered by such threat by providing reliable and informative information as to its intentions and expectations with regard to the operations of the asset management company. Mr. Speaker.
Is there a second to the motion?
Ms.
Go ahead, member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because I really would have had great joy in pointing to the law, but I don't want to spend so much time on that. I'd rather spend it on my motion, and I don't want to start off in the wrong place. Remember, we want this to be constructive, and we want it to be collaborative. We want it to be respectful.
You're allowed to
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know that your experience in this role will magnify enormously in the coming weeks.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
I am as well. Mr. Speaker, this motion and motion 490, which we haven't come yet, but they were originally on the order paper for the meeting of this House, scheduled for Monday.
Okay. Just a moment. We are dealing with motion 489, aren't we? Would you like to make your remark pertaining to motion 489, and then we can go on to 490?
Mr. Speaker, I just want to remind you that in this honorable House, we're not going to be constrained or limited in any way. That is not the purport of our rules.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker, in that way.
Member, thank you. I appreciate all that. But I think, excuse me, member, please excuse me. What I'm saying in a candid way is that I believe organizational theory would allow us to better understand 489 as you go through it, and then 490 if you want to go through it or withdraw it. It's just to simplify and make life easier, I think. But you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because I'm an expert in organizational theory. If you remember, that's my education and training. And what I also know is that we can save time when we bundle things together. Okay. And so our objective, I believe, is the same, even though we have different ways of seeing how to do it. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Continue.
So this motion and the other motion, Mr. Speaker, were set down for the meeting of this House scheduled for Monday, 29th May 2017. And as members will recall, they were carried over until the next meeting. We didn't know when it was going to be, but this leaves me with a difficulty, which I want our people to understand, in coordinating my remarks, and it's why I wanted to lump them together to save time, between the three motions on the order paper today, and which I now wish in my comments to consolidate for this meeting rather than leaving the original motions unaltered. I'm sure the clerk will fully identify that because I've had active discussions with him.
Mr. Speaker, I want to be clear on the suggestion made by the member for Island Harbor. Is it that she intends to move all the motions together as one motion? Is this was being put
Member,
yeah.
My decision on this matter is that you deal with the motions individually. You deal with 489. When that's done, you deal with 490 if you want to explain or withdraw whatever it is your intention is. You deal with 491 separately. I think that is clearer. It is more simplistic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And
it's confusing.
I understand it's complicated for some of us. But, Mr. Speaker, let me say this, and I can speak briefly on the motion 489. Okay. And I will speak only briefly on it. The people, and there are many, many of them, Mr. Speaker, who are struggling to meet their mortgage commitments in Anguilla, and upon which their very right to live in their house and on their lands depends. And our people, Mr. Speaker, do not understand, because neither the asset management company nor the government have properly explained what their future holds. I believe that responsibility falls heavily on the part of government. So our people, Mr. Speaker, are faced with a dire threat to their very existence. Their security, the security of their families, and any sort of peace of mind, Mr. Speaker, that cannot be disputed. So, Mr. Speaker, it is not enough for the Honorable Chief Minister to say, if you don't like it, you can lump it, as he has said about his government's conduct of the nation's affairs. It is the government's duty to care compassionately for the people. Mr. Speaker, and I know that value of compassion in a highly polarized, divided Anguilla is not often apparent, but I know that in District 1, where the good people of District 1, even though they've supported a particular political party forever, the people of District 1 stepped outside of the normal expectations, as they did in the revolution, to make change. And I believe, and I want to say at this minute, to another thank you. I'm so grateful for the good people of District 1 showing that change in Anguilla is possible. And Mr. Speaker, that value of compassion, it's simple. And our people know it, Mr. Speaker. You know what they say? They say, when you look at the value of compassion, and they did not put it in those words exactly, but they will say, there, but for the grace of God, go I. There, but for the grace of God. And it is that understanding, and it is that value, and it's that compassion that allows them to reach out and embrace others who might not have the same political view or expectation. And I am grateful to the good people of District 1 who demonstrate that reliably every day. I'm so proud that I see that manifested, and I saw it manifested in the last election. And I've called on the Chief Minister, the Honorable Chief Minister, in several contexts to say, let's embrace all those people who say that they're suffering, because there for the grace of God go a lot of us, Mr. Speaker. That is it. It's strictly that. It's not to say that they're right in their positioning, and many of them are right, because the facts support their claims. But that value of compassion, how much we need it now, and to model it. And so, Mr. Speaker, it's not enough to leave the rest of the Anguillian people. I talk in Dickinson terms when I say those outside the gate, those not included, because for some reason they're not included. Is it because they're not good enough? Is it because they don't support a political party? Is it because they represent a reality in Anguilla that we'd rather put our heads under our wings and pretend it doesn't exist? I don't know. But, Mr. Speaker, we can't leave those people, and the Honorable Chief Minister shouldn't be leaving those people, or any other member of his government shouldn't be leaving those people to guess whether the activities of the asset management company are destined to result in the dissipation to foreign speculators of Anguilla's most precious possession, its land. And we know that in the Kapjaluka matter that was conducted recently, more land was transferred over to the entity. So up to now, the Chief Minister hasn't shared with the public what that is, but that is my understanding, and that is what we need to look at. Is this a recipe for how we're going to move going forward? I hope the Honorable Chief Minister will tell the people today. Now, very early in this Parliament, this House established that committee I spoke about on the indigenous banking sector, and it was convened once, as I said in the prelude, and which has not hitherto accomplished any useful purpose. Now, Mr. Speaker, that committee, I really believe, should now be established to consider and make recommendations on the issues in the motion before you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
You're welcome.
Mr. Speaker, one last thought. The value of this motion, noticing, and I want our people to know that the second nominated member isn't here, and several other elected officials are not present at the table today. But I want, and I will ask, that all representatives, each and every one of the representatives present, and Mr. Speaker, I see the Honorable Everly Bradley, I see the Honorable Cardigan Connor, Minister for West End, I see the Honorable Curtis A. Richardson, Member for Road South, I see the Honorable Chief Minister, and he can go back. But Mr. Speaker, I am confident that this being the right thing to share information, that across the board, this will be the kind of matter that government could start off again on the right foot. I know the mayor of the Mayor's Show. I know the mayor often says if it doesn't start right, it doesn't end right. But I continue to hold out hope that our representatives will take personal responsibility, each and every one of them. They cannot pretend and be hypocritical in this regard if they are not going to support a simple motion to share information with the people, to be compassionate, and to reach towards correcting a lot of mistakes and a lot of misperception as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're welcome, member from District 1. We're going to move on to the second motion, but just before that, let me just emphasize that the rules before the House indicate that when a motion is brought before the House, after the mover of any motion or any amendment has spoken in support thereof, no debate shall be allowed until the motion or amendment has been duly seconded, unless the Assembly is in committee when a motion or amendment may be put without being seconded. So we are moving on. And that's Rule 38.
And may I remind you as well, Mr. Speaker, of your responsibility to put it to the whole House. Is there a seconder? Because, Mr. Speaker, the rules envisage that with the business of the House, always, that there will be an opportunity for cross support. You see it in the UK all the time. That is the model on which we're based. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're welcome. Can we move on to motion 490? Is there a seconder to the motion?
I don't know how much time we need to determine what's the right thing to do. I don't know how much time we need.
Well, if there's no seconder, can we move on to the next motion, please?
Motion 490.
Motion 490. Be it hereby resolved that in view of the harsh deprivation and poverty that is rife in Anguilla, and the fact that EC $256,451 was earmarked. And remember, Mr. Speaker, this was intended to be prior to the 29th Mayor. We now, hopefully, when we speak, we will get more. But I just want our public to understand the motion. Has been earmarked as expenditure for the celebrations of the 50th anniversary of the Anguilla Revolution and Anguilla Day 2017. That the government, this was my wish at the time and it's been overtaken, but we'll go through the motion. The government retract, this was my desire for the government to retract its request to the Permanent Secretary in Finance, which was minuted in EXCO Minute 17-138, to consider options as to the availability of an additional $100,000, EC 270,000, towards the Anguilla Day celebrations, and to report to the Executive Council on 13th April 2017. By the way, Mr. Speaker, that report doesn't appear in the minutes, and that the government considered diverting any resources, that's what I wish, that the government considered diverting any resources that the PS Finance purported to identify as available for such purpose to the relief of poverty. I would like it to go to the feeding program, our children in the schools. That is what I would really have desired. And while, Mr. Speaker, this motion has been overtaken by events, since the Anguilla Day celebrations have come and gone, I hope that in replying to this motion, the government will use the opportunity to disclose to this House, and by extension, the people of Anguilla, on the one hand, what level of additional resources it committed to the Anguilla Day celebrations, and on the other hand, what additional level of resources it has committed to the relief of poverty or the school feeding programs that is afflicting our country, the less fortunate, the vulnerable people of this country. And Mr. Speaker, just to put it in context, for the good people of District 1, where the revolution started, in fact, Mr. Speaker, the birthplace of the Anguilla Revolution is Island Harbor. Its mother and father, the late Honorable Ronald Webster, the late Honorable Atlin Noraldo Harrigan, OBE, credited with the leadership of the Anguilla Revolution, our people in Island Harbor, our families who sacrificed so much, the birthplace. I wrote, Mr. Speaker, to ask for some provision to be made for that to be recognized in an official capacity, in an official way during the celebration. And needless to say, short of the community expenditure, which in these circumstances are not as plentiful as we will manifest them to be, we had not enough. But for our government to disregard that part, that important part that Island Harbor and District 1 played in the revolution is directed, I believe, at minimizing the contributions of our revolutionaries, our great leaders, and it was a way of minimizing their legacies. That is how I feel. Not a single thing. As the representative of District 1, I've become used to the fact that political purposes are always delivered, whether it's at a festival, whatever it is. But for this great, awesome event and this great, awesome contribution of the good people of Island Harbor, all of our relatives who've sacrificed so much for Anguilla, not even to be recognized. And it could have been as easy as putting a rock there, Mr. Speaker. The British have already put down a rock that says what is there. And of course, the community, we've also put down a rock, Mr. Speaker, to recognize the contributions of the Ramblers. But for our government and the 50th anniversary to do nothing, not even to come out to demonstrate with a few flags in the earth, what is, that they value that sacrifice. It's untenable and sad. And our people, I promise you, haven't missed it. And I want to say in relation to the Speaker, as I said before, that this motion was before this Honorable House, and therefore before the government in a timely fashion. I wanted to make a difference. And the government had the opportunity to act upon the principle it expresses. I did that. In addition to writing, this was in front of the House. And I therefore asked, Mr. Speaker, that in responding to it, the government not dismiss it as obsolete, but respond to the substance of it. And I'm sure that Mr. Speaker, while I shall not move the motion, and I would merely ask the government to comment on it. Yes,
So,
thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let me just be clear. You're not moving the motion. That's what you said?
Mr. Speaker, the motion is obsolete. It's been made obsolete by virtue, and if we'd had an active screening of that, it would not have found its way, but I'm glad it did, because it gives us an opportunity for the government, with good intention, to allay that, not from a political standpoint, but just to share with the people what has happened.
So your request is that the government shares at this moment with the people.
Mr. Speaker.
And there can only be debate if there's a second to the motion.
Mr. Speaker, I've already said I shall not move this motion, but merely ask the government, maybe they'll comment with it later, to report on its substance.
Well, the member from District 1 has asked if any member of the government wishes to comment on this issue. It is up to the members to comment if they want. If not, we will move to motion 491.
Motion 4.
Member, you have a comment to make? Okay.
Motion 491.
Thank you very much. Back to move motion 491. It's a censure motion, Mr. Speaker. Whereas on Tuesday, 30th May 2017, a large body of people under the leadership of Mr. Etienne Trigger Gums, representing the people of Anguilla, mounted a protest concerning the real and serious grievances and hardships of the people that have been occasioned by the government's policies and actions. And whereas neither the Honorable Chief Minister nor any member of his government have responded adequately or at all to demonstrate that they have addressed or intend to address and remedy those grievances. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this Honorable House has no confidence that the government has the interests of the people of Anguilla at heart, believes that the government's priorities are driven by partisan interests, self-interest, and favoritism, and calls upon the Chief Minister and all members of his party to resign forthwith to make way for a new government that will treat the interests of all Anguillians as its first priority. Mr. Speaker, all Anguillians, indeed, all human beings, have one thing in common. I think you will agree. We like to be appreciated. We like to be shown consideration. But above all, we like to be treated with compassion. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian, a Gentile, or Muslim, or an atheist. And then, well, we have all of these religious sects. It doesn't matter whether you're a gentle person, Mr. Speaker, or an angry person. We all have that characteristic of liking to be loved. We need it. Mr. Speaker, I speak for myself. I need it. I thrive on it. I survive on it. And Mr. Speaker, I started earlier when I was talking about 1967. That is how our people used to be. And some of our families, Mr. Speaker, even though we have the political differences, and even though we don't like to say who we voted for or what happened, serious political differences, Mr. Speaker, there's one thing we enjoy and love is to be able to say to that other person, I love you, I hear you, I value you. That is what we have. And District 1, we can say that that is not, you know, it's the reason why Anguilla was known as tranquility wrapped in blue, because the people were so loving. But sadly, Mr. Speaker, save for a few Anguillians who demonstrate this constantly every time they see you, it is not the norm. And we can ask ourselves, what has happened? What has happened? Can it be that the catastrophes that have struck Anguilla's economy since 2015 are all a result of prior maladministration and external economic forces for which our present government has no responsibility? Of course not. But if our present government disclaims any responsibility for the decline in national morale, and we saw that on Anguilla Day in a big way, the two cities. If our government disclaims any responsibility for decline in national morale and the somber mood, the depressed mood that now prevails in Anguilla, why does it conceal the facts? Why? Why does it not have sufficient evidence in the people's fair-mindedness to share all the issues and share their view of the remedies? Why does the Chief Minister say, if you don't like it, you can lump it? Does that, Mr. Speaker, reflect his engagement with the concerns of the people? In law, we say, the AG will understand that the thing speaks for itself. Res ipsa loquitur, we say. It speaks for itself. And it condemns the honorable member for Road South, because of course not. Obviously, does that reflect his engagement with the concerns of the people? Obviously, it's quite the reverse. Mr. Speaker, and I am heartened yet again by the prayer of our new chaplain, because in the good old days, he saw it working, cooperation, discernment, working together, caring about each other, learning together. You know, age and experience, Mr. Speaker, are the much vaunted attributes of the Honorable Chief Minister. He tells us all the time, age and experience. But, Mr. Speaker, age and experience are no guarantee of wisdom. I'm realizing that every time I hear the national song, grant our leaders wisdom and grace, I recognize we got a long way to go. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize here, I haven't had an opportunity to do it yet personally, but I intend to. I want to recognize that young parliamentarian who wrote to the Honorable Chief Minister to express her sadness and disappointment that, in her view, that the Chief Minister disrespected, demonstrated that, actively demonstrated a lack of respect towards me. I think she indicated that, but also towards the people. I've got a letter on my phone, and in this motion, I really should read it, I suppose. But Mr. Speaker, yes, I will read it because it goes to motion. But I'll read it a little bit later. Just let me say, before I wrap up, I will read the letter. But, Mr. Speaker, I think it's very pertinent to this motion, because there's a young person, a young parliamentarian, a young person, you know, concerned about sustainability and the future of Anguilla. And I said, Mr. Speaker, age and experience. 35 years plus and counting, the Chief Minister often reminds me across the table. But the youngest Prime Minister of Britain, and it's because of Gleneva Hodge, I'm sorry if I got her name wrong, but this young parliamentarian's letter that got me on this line of thought, because the youngest Prime Minister of Britain, and that's ever been, was William Pitt the Younger, who was Prime Minister of Great Britain at the age of 24. And not only was he the longest serving, but something, when I looked at his contribution, led me to a quote that he's well known for. He said, "Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom." So when we think of the interim stabilization levy, we're told it's necessary. When we're talking about social security funds being deployed in a way that's one day will be challenged because of its mandate, we're told it's necessary. When offshore depositors' monies are taken, we're told that it's necessary. And what he said, that wise Prime Minister at the age of 24, necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. And it is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves. Think about that, Mr. Speaker. Heavy stuff, but history is relevant. And I want to thank again that young parliamentarian for standing up. Through her, I have confidence in her positioning. I have confidence that Anguilla has a promising future. I have every confidence of it. And I only have to stand at graduation ceremonies and see our young primary students in District 1, Vivian Vanderpool Primary School. I was just so in awe of your presentation yesterday. I have confidence in Anguilla's promising future. So what William Pitt the Younger was saying is absolutely applicable to the present oppression we find ourselves under at this time in Anguilla. He was saying that a government that claims that its oppressive rule is necessary because of the circumstances it's been landed with amounts to tyranny. And I say that the style of the government being pursued by the Honorable Chief Minister and supported by his compliant ministers and members is the government of a tyrant, no less. And history will show that. Somebody said to me, you know, and I don't like that, and I don't like when we call each other names. I don't like it. And I want to discourage anybody from doing that, as I discouraged this person this morning. But they asked me, Mr. Speaker, whether I was familiar with the practice of lapdogs. And the truth is, I love dogs because dogs are incredibly, you know, in caring for dogs, we cultivate that value of compassion, but I don't know what that referred to. But if it's to do with the fact that there is an unintentional and almost chemical driven way of engaging in certain behaviors, then I can see what that person was thinking about. I can see what that person was trying to get me to understand. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we need...
Excuse me, can I seek to understand its relevance, that illustration, what's its relevance?
Mr. Speaker, I believe that in describing a group's propensity to just follow along and not take responsibility, that is the behavior that is characteristic of that animal, those kinds of dogs. And I believe that's it. And I think that what the person was trying to say to me is that that is what you call this behavior. That is what you call that behavior. I choose to say it's a behavior that's incompassionate, and it's not, it's non-compliant, it's a level of compliance that is adverse to every person taking personal responsibility. That's how I see it. Mr. Speaker, I hope that's helpful to you, but we can look it up. Both you and I can perhaps learn from what lap dogs do. I don't know. I do not say that, Mr. Speaker, just so I'm not misunderstood. I don't say that, and I also want our chaplain to know that God is with me and that I want the words of my mouth to be acceptable. I want the words of my mouth to be acceptable. So I do not say that, Mr. Speaker, to condemn the Chief Minister's motives. He may very well believe that he's doing the very best he can do for Anguilla. What I am saying, however, is that his personality does not allow the compassion that is needed, doesn't allow the compassion to manifest itself. In my view, Mr. Speaker, our Honorable Chief Minister and member for Valley South has a most unfortunate blockage that does not allow him in the political context to be generous or to demonstrate his compassion. I would love, Mr. Speaker, that like the great leaders in history, that our Honorable Chief Minister could take himself out of that place and commit to new learning, a new politics, a new regime, because what an amazing opportunity we have now in Anguilla just by demonstrating that value of compassion. How we can deliver it. What an opportunity. So I don't say it to condemn his motives, but we have issues. So why do I say that? The Honorable Chief Minister tacitly approved of the booing of my speech on Anguilla Day by his supporters. And how he did that? He failed to condemn the booing, and by mocking the protesters who were behaving, indeed, in an exemplary fashion, thanks to the responsibility of a lot of leading influencers.
Mr. Speaker.
Member from District 1.
On a point of order.
What's the point of order?
I think that the honourable member for...
Member from District, so what's the point of order?
That the member for Isle Harbour is imputing wrong motives to me. You're saying that I am tacitly approved the booing of her when she made her speech on Anguilla Day? How could I tacitly improve? What was I supposed to do, Mr. Speaker? If the member for Island Harbor, who is, I would imagine, a politician representing the people of Island Harbor, got up and made a speech, it is her responsibility to ensure that whatever speech she makes, she is willing and able to accept the response from the audience. I don't have to tell the audience how to respond to her. That's not my responsibility. It's her responsibility to use that occasion to ensure that she communicates with the audience in a manner that is befitting the occasion. I had nothing to do with it, Mr. Speaker, and I like her to retract the statement. Well, you may not see it, but I've made it.
I want the record to reflect that there was no point of order.
Before we move on, I want to know if the member from District 1 informed in any way that the member from Dallas South had anything to do with the booing of the park.
Mr. Speaker, as he's done in the past, it's not surprising. It's happened before.
If that's your experience, that he had something to do with the member from Dallas South.
Mr. Speaker, what I said is that when a leader fails to act, he's tacitly approving something. We talked about organizational theory and how leaders communicate, and that is a big area. So there was no point of order, but let's not lose time.
Mr. Speaker, I made a point of order that the member for Island Harbor implied and stated, as a matter of fact, that I tacitly approved the booing on the park of her speech. That is what I to me, and that is my point of order.
I'm a member from District 1, and that's the inference. I would ask that you withdraw the statement.
That he tacitly approved it, I don't withdraw it, Mr. Speaker, because I've got the open letter to the Chief Minister that I spoke about earlier. And here is what that letter said, Mr. Speaker, by Gleneva, the young parliamentarian.
Mr. Speaker,
Gleneva Hodge.
On point of order. The member for Island Harbor is bringing evidence that I tacitly approved by bringing a document, a letter in this honorable house, claiming that I don't understand where she gets her evidentiary thing.
Let me say this before. Let me say this. You asked that the Speaker of the House be impartial.
Yes.
In a way, I would say that if you infer that a member from Valley South inferred in a way or supporting in a way booing on the park, that be retracted, because I don't think it's fair to bring somebody else's interpretation, what they felt in terms of his involvement, as evidence. As evidence.
You know, Mr. Speaker.
Excuse me there, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a point of order?
Yes. Point of order, point of clarification. I would really like the member for Island Harbor to stop calling the young lady's name. Politics is a very dangerous business. She could just simply refer to the writer of the statement. I really would like the honorable member for Island Harbor to stop calling the young lady's name in this house. Politics, stop taking everything for a joke. It's not a joke. Stop it.
Member from District 6, point taken, yes. I would add that yes, you should be careful about name.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know what the political motives are, but I can tell you this is not a matter of politics for me. It is on the record. It is an open letter to the Chief Minister. But let me say, Mr. Speaker, don't let us miss the point. What I want to say, Mr. Speaker, is that, and I'm quite happy to move on from because I know that the Chief Minister approved it. But that's a matter for me. That's a
Mr.
matter
Speaker,
for me.
on a point of order, the member for Island Harbor is reinforcing the statement she made that I approved Boeing on the park. I mean, it's time for her to stop behaving in this manner. She's not getting anywhere with it. She's come to the House to bring a censure motion, and anybody who brings a censure motion to the House and knows that they don't have anybody to second the motion, know that the motion will be not successful. So obviously, she is staging a motion in this honorable House, Mr. Speaker, that she has no intention and she has no chance of passing in this honorable House.
Member from District 1, do you have any evidence to show that the member from Valley South in any way supported the Boeing? That's the issue on the park. That's the issue. The issue is there was an occurrence on the park. And what I'm hearing is that that's the issue that you said you know. And if you don't have evidence, just withdraw the motion and let's move on.
I started by saying I'm certainly committed to continual learning, and that age and experience is not necessarily an attribute that demonstrates wisdom. So I'm going to take the high road, Mr. Speaker, and I want to move on with my motion, please.
Before you do,
To answer your question,
before you do, just let me say this. Before you do, please. It is with an understanding that such a motion really brings out the best in our democracy, where a motion can be brought against the government to resign, and I stay here very impartial. Would have to ask members on the other side if they have a seconder. That's part of the task that I have. But this is what I want to say. We have to pay attention to repetition and relevance. We cannot in this House blemish our responsibility because we have privileges and therefore the dignity of Parliament. Through misuse, and this goes to everybody, and abuse of wasting time. Wasting time is in fruitless discourse is unnecessary. We must move from a level of intellectual capacity, and therefore, in that vein alone, we can deliver for the people. So, when a member stands up and makes claims, if there's no evidence to support the claim, then that should not be part of the process. But I'm going to ask you to move on to your comments.
by failing, I believe, to condemn the booing and the mocking of the protesters, I believe the Chief Minister, the Honorable Chief Minister, whose responsibility it is in the climate and context we're experiencing in Anguilla, whose responsibility it is to unify and lead us, I think that was a neglect or refusal to do the right thing that any great leader would have done. I would like to say that. And I would say further that words cannot describe my contempt for the irresponsible and infantile, divisive approach of the very person whom we should be able to look up to as a wise and compassionate leader. With all those years of experience, I'm in this House, Mr. Speaker, 2.5 years almost, not quite. Our Chief Minister often says he's been in this House upwards of 30-some years. And that is what my personal view. I felt by neglecting to act in a particular way, he fanned the flames of division on that day. That is my personal view, and I am assuring you, Mr. Speaker, that I do not take the value of responsibility lightly. And I give my people, our people, the assurance that I do not take it lightly. So, Mr. Speaker, my speech was no more than a plea for compassionate and inclusive government. That was all it was. And unlike William Pitt, the younger, who I made mention of earlier, Mr. Banks, who was born in 1947, I believe.
Can you refer, can you refer to the member?
Indeed. Sorry, I apologize for that. And I apologize to the honorable member for Valley South for using his name. I'm so sorry for that. Another slip due to experience. But I want to say that the honorable member for Valley South, public records show that he was born in 1947 and was elected, first came to this honorable house in 1981 at the age of about 34. And he continually boasts of the value of his long experience in politics. And if he understood the meaning of compassion ever, he appears to have forgotten it. Or as I've just said, forgotten how to apply and express it. And he's unquestionably past, in my view. I don't want to be unkind, but our people say sell by date. Have I passed my, they tell a target to a lot of us. But there's a date that, in terms of experience, if you're not growing, continually growing, there's a certain point at which we have to acknowledge that we have higher standards to aspire to. And so as the Chief Minister and his colleagues well know, the concerns of those who mounted a protest, the other city, outside the gates, included and continue to include the following very real issues. The deliberate action of the government to maintain the interim stabilization levy for over 2 years now, since the last general election, despite the governing party having made the abolition of the interim stabilization levy a key pledge in its 2015 election manifesto. They say it's necessary. Prevarication over electoral and constitutional reform, and I have some the loss of former bank workers' pensions, a real issue. The government's collaboration with the transitioning to foreigners' banking, on that now coming from the UK, what the real motivation is, with a strong suspicion that the government sees reforms of the electoral system as contrary to its future interests. The loss of former bank workers' pensions, a real issue. The government's collaboration with the transitioning to foreigners' banking jobs that should be held by Anguillians, while at the same time claiming in its 50th anniversary posters to be empowering our people and building our nation. And in fact, even more recently, when you think of that pledge, when you realize that foreign-owned businesses are taking over all our local businesses, and the government again is standing by and neglecting to do the right thing by Anguillians, you can't pretend we don't have substantive issues to discuss. Another substantive issue, the passage of legislation to give an alien entity, the Eastern Caribbean Asset Management Corporation, control over a large proportion of Anguillan properties, even though the functions of that entity can be formed by Anguillan entities, and despite the fact that the legislation, along with the Banking Act, passed at the same time, on its face, violates the Anguilla Constitution. Wow. Now, the damage to Anguilla's name is another big issue. It's Anguilla, the damage to Anguilla's name as a safe jurisdiction in which to invest, caused by the cancellation of offshore depositors' monies. A safe place in which to invest. There went that limb, that opportunity to engage in financial services in the industry, to rely on that for the future. The government's refusal, and this is doubly worrying, to publish the banking report while at the same time placing the financial burden of the so-called banking resolution on the people through increased taxation, substantially increased debt that generations, including those young primary school children who go into high school tomorrow, God spare life, without the necessary supplies they need even to have a viable chance at school, they will have to pay for. Yes, the increased debt that generations of Anguillians will have to repay, and incalculable and lasting damage to Anguilla's name. Mr. Speaker, I'm at some disadvantage, I must let you know, in attempting to expose this government for what it truly is. That is because the poverty and hardship inflicted on this country is so intimately connected with the failure of the two indigenous banks and the surreptitious and pernicious manner in which the government has inflicted on the people intolerable burdens arising out of that calamity. These are issues relating to the so-called banking resolution, and you know it is a subject of litigation. So, you know how I am, what my passion is for the rule of law, and I'm going to rely on the Honorable Chief Minister to do the right thing by the people and go into that a little bit more. But members of this House will nevertheless understand, even if they unjustifiably seek to excuse it, that without my enlarging on those issues, the incredible injustice that has been inflicted on the defenseless people of Anguilla by the self-interested policies, I'm going to say it again, self-interested policies of a tyrannical government, an incredible injustice has been inflicted on the defenseless people of Anguilla by the self-interested policies of a tyrannical government, and each and every minister, whether they know all the details or not, have to be plastered by that same brush of actively failing in the representation of our people. As St. Paul said in Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 to 3, and I'm quoting from the New International Version. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ. And I want our member for Road South to pay attention to this particularly, because I know he's a God-fearing man. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit, being one in mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. So let us now, men, women, young, old, bear our calamities like heroes. Let us recognize that we cannot look to this chief minister or any of his compliant ministers and fellow members to show the slightest degree of compassion in their government of Anguilla. Let us cast off the recent past and embrace a brighter future. Let us have a breed of new politicians, young, vibrant, creative, competent, and above all, compassionate. Let us again secure the Anguilla that gave source to the name Tranquility in Blue. Let us have a safe and secure rock. Let us have a new Anguilla now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move this motion.
Thank you, member from District 1. Is there a seconder?
I thought I saw the member for Road North stand up, Road South stand up a moment ago.
If there's no seconder, can we move on?
Other business, government business. Cremation Amendment Bill 2017, second reading.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Cremation Act Amendment 2017 be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, this bill has been before the House, has passed in this honorable House, Mr. Speaker, in 2014. And we are here today, Mr. Speaker, like any other bill, or act, so to speak. It's not perfect. And we are here, Mr. Speaker, to make some amendments to the bill. Of course, the nation and the crematory process says they are fairly new to us here in Anguilla. That service is new to us here in Anguilla. And I'm sure that the companies that will be engaged in this particular process, Mr. Speaker, would have done quite a bit of research, and I'm sure it is part and parcel of their training, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bill consists of 9 clauses. Clause 1 is the interpretation section of the bill, Mr. Speaker. Clause 2 seeks to repeal and replace definitions as well as to add new definitions. Clause 3 provides that a license is required to establish a crematorium. The Cremation Amendment Bill seeks to amend the Cremation Act, RSA c, C-138, with the aim of improving the administration of the Act. Mr. Speaker, the bill consists of 9 clauses. Clause 1 is the interpretation section of the bill, Mr. Speaker. Clause 2 seeks to repeal and replace definitions as well as to add new definitions. Clause 3 provides that a license is required to establish a crematorium. Clause 4 outlines the requirements to be met in order to be granted a license to establish a crematorium. Clause 5 provides that the minister may, by order of Executive Council, revoke a license to carry on the business of a crematorium issued under the Trades, Business Occupations and Professional License Act. Clause 6 provides that the minister may, by order of Executive Council, close a crematorium if the crematorium operator is not compliant with the stated requirements under the Act. Clause 7 provides that the crematorium operator has to keep the crematorium in good condition. And Clause 8 amends Section 16, subsection 1 by repealing and substituting paragraph H and by repealing paragraph I. And Clause 9 states the citation of the bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these amendments are necessary. A number of them are tidying up and making the language, so to speak, much more user-friendly, Mr. Speaker. And I will just give one example. The Cremations Act of 2014, in the interpretations and definitions, Mr. Speaker, it says cremation means the reduction to ashes of human remains by burning. The amendment that we are doing today, Mr. Speaker, reads, cremation, cremated remains means human remains that have been reduced to ash by cremation, substituting the word burning by cremation. And a number of repeal and replacing and so on and so forth. So really and truly, Mr. Speaker, this is tidying up the act that is already on the books. And I'm hoping that we will get the full support of this honorable House, Mr. Speaker. As we know, this cremation and crematory process, a number of Anguillians previously would have not thought about that, going to the traditional burial places. But, Mr. Speaker, I have already made a request that my remains be cremated. I'll be cremated, and my remains, Mr. Speaker, be sprinkled from the roundabout going into Shoal Bay until it reaches the beach. And I'm hoping that a number of Anguillians would take the opportunity to do some research in terms of the whole crematory process and the cremation, so to speak. We have 2 established funeral homes in Anguilla, and the technology, Mr. Speaker, and the safety processes are something that is regular. And I'm sure that they will follow quite strictly the regulations and the requirements, because within this bill, environmental officers, the Ministry of Health, and so on, would be monitoring it very closely. So I present this to this honorable House, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Valley North. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I raise the second motion.
Thank you. Member from District 6. And I invite debate on the merits and principles of the bill.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I rise to give support to this motion. I have attended a number of funerals recently, and I've noticed that a lot of our burial grounds are becoming extremely filled, and this will give us in Anguilla an opportunity to have another form of dealing with the remains of our expired loved ones. My heart today, Mr. Speaker, also is burdened to some extent over the passing of a comrade from the Road South community, Mr. Lawrence Brooks. I'm extremely saddened by his passing, and I will ask the people of Anguilla to continue to pray and bear his family up in prayer. But I believe that this crematory process can serve Anguilla very well. And I've also noticed I'm going to several of the burial grounds, and I'm going to ask my colleagues here today to support me. Something needs to be done in an effort to paint up some of these tombstones, as well as I noticed from years gone by, a lot of the graves were not prepared how they are today with very good ways of preserving the location. And there are a number of graves that were just covered down with earth, and the earth over the years has been washed out. It is very challenging to tell exactly where the spot is, and I think something needs to be done so that we can make a better effort in taking care of our burial grounds. That is something that needs to be addressed in short order. But I think a lot of people in Anguilla, when they have done their own research, will understand and appreciate that this crematory process can put Anguilla in a much better place. Of course, everything in life comes down to choice, and there are persons who would like the cadavers, their bodies, to be buried as they have lived, and there are others who would like to be cremated. So I would like to give my support to this bill today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Valley South is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this motion. The Cremation Act has been long in coming, and as you well know, a number of, at least one funeral director has been anxious to get this done. The demand for cremation is rising, and I think that in terms of environment generally, persons who make those choices do have some concerns about the environment, others do it for other reasons. It's important that we have those options, those choices. A number of persons have been cremated in Anguilla, and that process has to take place in other jurisdictions. As a consequence, if we have the facility here, it would greatly reduce the costs to loved ones who want to ensure that their loved ones' wishes are met, even as they are passed on. It involves a number of amendments, Mr. Speaker, and a number of them will take place during the process. But I'm happy to report that it is finally done, and I'm sure that persons in this industry will have this opportunity to improve on the way they are able to deal with the passing of persons within the community. And in fact, one of the operators has already begun to develop, or as a matter of fact, I think have completed a facility to engage this process. So I would like to commend this motion to this Honorable House. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Valley South. Are there any further member from District 1?
Mr. Speaker, I also supported, and I wanted to say why I supported it, because I know it's been straggling there for a really long time. But I myself had a lot of learning to do when I first heard about crematorium the cremation process. And some of my family members had questions about, and I'm sure other Anguillians will have questions about whether, you know, that is a good thing to do, whether it's in line with our biblical and Christian teachings. And I want to acknowledge that, that in fact, many years ago now, but when the issue first came up here, we had, you know, some community persons consult with the church and consult with the Anglican Church particularly about it. And we received the assurance that it is in line with biblical teachings. It's a very, you know, it's a well-recognized practice. So I just want those who might wonder about the support that I'm extending, if I've considered that, I just want to make that clear. Mr. Speaker, while I'm on my feet and we're thinking about the cremation process and the burial process, I just want to recognize as well that the recent burial of the passing and burial of a national hero, again done posthumously and in, you know, sad circumstances, by the passing of Common Cedar Woods. And I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if I could implore you, perhaps just because it's outside of the situation where I might have been able to make a personal statement, but linked to this motion, and after, if we could have our Chief Minister and other ministers recognize a national hero in the way that we customarily do it. And I know that that others have lost others, certainly, and my condolences, my personal condolences, I extend to all persons who are grieving in Anguilla linked to the loss of loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Member from Island Harbour. Are there any further contributions? If there are no further, are there any further contributions? Mover?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honorable colleagues in this honorable House for their support on this cremation amendment bill 2017. And Mr. Speaker, the member for Road South mentioned care of our cemeteries, and I would like to echo some serious concerns with respect to that as well. And to appeal to the people of Anguilla, especially those who would have vaults that are uncovered, so to speak, and that the quality of the texture of the material they used to cover them over the years, Mr. Speaker, the wear and tear and the elements, the natural elements, have left a lot of those vaults, Mr. Speaker, open, and really and truly they are catchments to water, the mosquitoes and Zika and everything else. So I'm using this to appeal to the general public. In all the cemeteries, so to speak, Mr. Speaker, I have noticed these open vaults that really and truly are not healthy for the population in general, and that our loved ones who are in some of these vaults really and truly needs to be looked after much better than it's being done at the moment. So just to say that, and again to thank the House for their support with the amendments to this cremation bill 2017.
Thank you, member from Valley North. It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled "A Bill for Cremation Amendment Act 2017" be now read a second time. Those in favor? Those against?
Aye, Mr. Speaker, I supported it.
Okay. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a second time.
A bill to amend the Cremation Act, Revised Statutes of Anguilla, Chapter C-138.
Under Rule 54 of the Legislative Assembly Rules of Procedure, the bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole Assembly to consider it clause by clause. Assembly committee.
clauses 1 through 9.
Put the question that clauses 1 through 9 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The preamble.
Put a question that the preamble do stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The enacting clause.
Put a question that the enacting clause do stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The Assembly will now resume its sitting.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to report that the bill entitled the Cremation Amendment Act 2017 has passed through committee without amendment. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill entitled the Cremation Amendment Act 2017 be read a third time and pass amendments and is ready for its third reading.
Thank you, member from District 3.
The Cremation Amendment Bill 2017, third reading.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to second.
Member from District 6. It has been moved and seconded that a bill entitled an ordinance, that a bill entitled Cremation Amendment Act 2017 be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a third time.
A bill to amend the Cremation Act, Revised Statutes of Anguilla, Chapter C, 138.
Bill read a third time and passed.
Coroner Amendment Bill 2017, first reading.
Mr. Speaker,
Member from Valley North is recognized.
I beg that a bill entitled the Coroner's Amendment Act 2017 be read the first time.
Thank you, member from Valley North.
A bill to amend the Coroner's Act, Revised Statutes of Anguilla, Chapter C, 125. Trades, Businesses, Occupations, and Professions Licensing Amendment Bill 2017, first reading.
Member from Valley South, sorry.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask of the clerk of the House of Assembly to read for the first time a bill entitled Trades, Business, Occupations, and Professions Licensing Amendment Act 2017.
Thank you, member from Valley South.
A bill to amend the Trades, Businesses, Occupations, and Professions Licensing Act, Revised Statutes of Anguilla, Chapter T, 40. Adjournment.
Mr. Speaker, before I move to adjournment, I noted the comment made by the member for Island Harbor with regards to the passing of the late Carmen Sita Woods. And on the occasion of her burial, the Honorable House the government of Anguilla gave her the normal honors as befitting a person who would ever receive those awards, albeit they were received posthumously. But the Executive Council passed that she be granted those honors and privileges because of her contribution to Anguilla, particularly during the period of the Revolution. I was unable to be on island for that sad event, Mr. Speaker, and I would have given my indications to the family about my absence, but I thank the honorable member for Valley North, the member responsible, acting as Deputy Chief Minister, to have brought the statement from the government on that occasion. And as the member for Island Harbor indicated, we are all saddened by her passing and grateful to her contribution to this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, I now move that this House stands adjourned.
Just a moment. If we can stand in for a minute of silence on up
that's appropriate
before we adjourn.
Is that appropriate, Mr. Speaker? Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Please.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that this House stands adjourned, signed, and dare.
Do we have a second? Seconded by the member from District 1. Those in favor of the House, please adjourn, signed, aye. Aye. Those against? The House now stands adjourned.